Ever wondered what could happen if your city was invaded by Nazis? Imagine the fear, the uncertainty, the sense of dread. Picture the world in the grip of World War II, a time of great strife and upheaval. In 1942, Canada gave us a glimpse into this grim possibility with If Day, a simulated Nazi invasion of Winnipeg. Today we will take a deep dive into the events of this unique day in history known as If Day. February 19, 1942, a day like no other in the city of Winnipeg, Canada. The morning started like any other. Citizens of Winnipeg went about their everyday routines. Children rushing off to school, adults heading to work, the usual humdrum of a peaceful city. Yet, unbeknownst to them, a unique and dramatic event was about to unfold, one that would disrupt their normalcy and bring the war, thousands of miles away, right to their doorstep. In the corridors of power, the Canadian government had been meticulously planning for this day. Their objective? To stage If Day, a simulated Nazi invasion and occupation of Winnipeg. It was an audacious plan, designed to bring the reality of war closer to home for the Canadians, to evoke an emotional response, and to stimulate the purchase of war bonds. The government left no stone unturned in their preparation. They orchestrated mock air raids, planned for the arrest of prominent citizens, and even prepared for the imposition of martial law. All these were designed to mirror, as closely as possible, the potential consequences of a real Nazi occupation. As the day rolled on, the citizens of Winnipeg continued their routines, oblivious of the planned disruption. The city hummed with the rhythm of a typical day, the impending simulated invasion merely a whisper in the wind. And then, without warning, the invasion began. Suddenly the city was under attack, but this was not a real invasion. Imagine the scene. Air raid sirens blaring, citizens running for cover, the city of Winnipeg in chaos. But this was no ordinary day in World War II-era Canada. This was If Day, a simulated Nazi invasion designed to shock and awe, to provoke a visceral understanding of the potential consequences of a real enemy occupation. Picture a city gripped by fear and uncertainty as the skies filled with the ominous drone of aircraft. This was no mere sound effect. Real planes were used to stage a mock air raid, bringing the terror of war to the doorstep of an otherwise peaceful city. The shock was palpable, the fear real, as people sought shelter, their hearts pounding in their chests. Next, prominent citizens were arrested by Nazi soldiers, their freedom stripped away in a chilling demonstration of totalitarian rule. Imagine the city's mayor, the chief of police, and other officials being led away in handcuffs, powerless against the invaders. It was a striking image, one that brought home the stark reality of what an occupation could mean. Then came martial law. The Nazi soldiers imposed strict rules, curfews, and restrictions, controlling every aspect of daily life. Citizens were ordered to carry identification papers at all times and were subject to random checks. The city's newspapers were taken over, their front pages filled with Nazi propaganda. The freedom and liberties that the people of Winnipeg took for granted were suddenly erased, replaced with a dystopian nightmare. The city was now under a simulated Nazi occupation. But this was no ordinary simulation. The realism of If Day was striking, its impact profound. It was a stark reminder of the sacrifices being made by Allied forces around the world to defeat the Axis powers, and a wake-up call to those on the home front of the stark realities of war. If Day was not just a war bond drive, it was a vivid illustration of the potential consequences of a Nazi occupation. And for the citizens of Winnipeg, it was a day they would never forget. Imagine waking up to a city transformed by occupation. Overnight, Winnipeg, the city you knew, became a place where the enemy's language was plastered on public buildings and streets. Every sign, every label, every billboard was changed to German. The familiar had become foreign, the ordinary had become alarming. Your favorite coffee shop, the one you visited every morning, was no longer open for business at its usual time. The owners, like the rest of the city's residents, had to comply with the newly imposed curfew. The city that never slept was forced into an uneasy slumber, its vibrant nightlife extinguished. The public library, that sanctuary of knowledge and peace, was no longer open to everyone. Certain books were banned, their ideas deemed too dangerous, too subversive by the new regime. Intellectual freedom, a right we often take for granted, was suddenly and cruelly curtailed. Daily routines were disrupted. Children couldn't go to school, adults couldn't go to work, public gatherings were forbidden, people were arrested without reason, prominent citizens were taken away, their fate unknown. The city lived in fear, uncertainty its constant companion. But this wasn't the real horror of war. It was a simulation, a play enacted to shake people out of their complacency, to show them what could happen if the enemy were to win. And it worked. People were scared, they were angry, they were moved. There was a collective realization of the magnitude of the threat, a united resolve to do whatever it took to prevent this nightmare from becoming a reality. The emotional response was intense. The simulated occupation had achieved its purpose. It had shown the citizens of Winnipeg, and indeed the whole of Canada, the stark reality of a world under Nazi rule. It had made them understand, in a very visceral way, the sacrifices being made by Allied forces around the world to prevent this from happening. The city of Winnipeg had experienced a day under Nazi rule, albeit simulated. But that one day was enough to change their perspective, to galvanize them into action, to inspire them to contribute to the war effort in any way they could. Opening, as abruptly as it had begun, the occupation ended. After a day filled with fear and uncertainty, the simulated Nazi occupation of Winnipeg came to a close. The city, which had experienced an entire day of martial law, mock air raids, and the staged arrest of its citizens, was finally able to return to a semblance of normalcy. But the experiences of If Day would linger in the minds of Winnipeg's residents for a long time. In the immediate aftermath of If Day, the city was left to grapple with the reality of what they had just experienced. The event was designed to be a wake-up call, a stark reminder of the potential consequences of a real Nazi occupation, and it had achieved its purpose. The citizens of Winnipeg were left with a heightened sense of the sacrifices being made by Allied forces around the world, and a renewed determination to support the war effort. The public's reaction to If Day was overwhelming. The event had been designed to evoke a strong emotional response, and it succeeded. Winnipeg's residents were shaken, but they were also galvanized. They recognized the importance of their role in supporting the war effort, and they were ready to step up. The Canadian government's war bond drive, which had organized If Day as part of its campaign, saw an uptick in sales following the event. The harrowing experience of If Day had made the threat of a Nazi occupation feel very real, and the citizens of Winnipeg were eager to do their part to prevent such a scenario from becoming a reality. In the days and weeks that followed, Winnipeg returned to its usual rhythms, but the memory of If Day lingered. It was a reminder of the potential cost of the war, and it underscored the importance of the public's support in the fight against the Axis powers. Ending, the citizens of Winnipeg breathed a collective sigh of relief. If Day was more than just a simulation. It was a vivid reminder of the stark reality of war and the potential consequences of complacency. It was an effective and dramatic tool used by the Canadian government to stir the hearts of its citizens and galvanize their support for the war effort. The impact of If Day was profound. The staged invasion and occupation of Winnipeg served as a wake-up call, prompting Canadians to consider the reality of what a Nazi occupation would mean for them, their families, and their country. The event was so realistic that it caused genuine fear among the populace, driving home the urgency of the war and the necessity of Canada's involvement. The dramatic scenes of If Day, the mock air raids, arrests of prominent citizens, and the imposition of martial law all contributed to a surge in the purchase of war bonds. These bonds were crucial in funding Canada's war effort and supporting their allies across the globe. The event successfully raised millions of dollars in war bonds, exceeding the government's initial target. But the significance of If Day extends beyond its immediate impact. It played a crucial role in the broader context of World War II, serving as a rallying cry for Canadians to support their troops and contribute to the defeat of the Axis powers. It reminded Canadians of the sacrifices being made by their soldiers overseas and the importance of their support on the home front. If Day also had a lasting impact on the collective memory of Canadians. It remains a powerful example of how a nation can rally its citizens in times of crisis using dramatic and imaginative methods to drive home a crucial message. In the end, If Day served as a stark reminder of the sacrifices made by Allied forces and the importance of supporting the war effort. It was a day that changed the course of a nation's involvement in a global conflict, a day that will forever be remembered in Canadian history.